Hello, everybody. Okay, I want to start with a four-letter word that captures the feeling that has most likely gone through our minds at some point in our life, and perhaps particularly over the last few months. Yeah, I'm sure you've guessed it. It's fear. We've all experienced it. For me, I know I've experienced lots of fear. In fact, when I think about it, fear has been present during much of my life. I've felt fear when I've sensed my life has been threatened. During combat operations, while serving with the Royal Air Force. During times as a pilot, when I've had an engine blow up or some other emergency. Almost recently, when I was faced with a guy who came at me totally unprovoked, but clearly intent on doing me some harm. I remember seeing with some alarm the veins pumping in his neck as he charged towards me with other words beginning with F spewing from his mouth. Fear washes through us when we feel our life is in danger. In that moment, we become focused on ourselves. No one else matters. Self-preservation kicks in, and that can be handy. It's the freeze, fight, or flight mechanism, and it's designed to save our life. When that raging bull of a guy came at me, and judging by his bulging muscles, he was some sort of bodybuilder of some sort, I don't know, a big guy. I tried to calm him down, and when that didn't work, well, let's just say I put some distance between me and the threat. I can attest that my freeze, fight, or flight mechanism served me very well that day. However, fear can also kick in when our life isn't threatened. Often it can be associated with a fear of loss of something that's really important to us, loss of our reputation, loss of our status, or perhaps loss of our livelihood. Perhaps it's our business that's threatened, the one, well, that we've built up over a decade or even generations. Our natural reaction can mirror our instinct for dealing with fear in a life-threatening situation. We can quickly find ourselves closing down, focusing on ourselves and our own survival as we seek to protect what's really important to us. The fear of loss can quickly be accompanied by other feelings too, such as anger or looking for someone or something else to blame. When gripped by fear, our attitude to risk changes too. Instead of seeing possibility, we're more likely to just see scarcity as we try to hold on to what we have at all costs. In business, that could be perhaps market share or our bottom line. At one extreme of fear, we might become filled with self-doubt. At the other extreme of fear, some of us might find ourselves being driven by ego as we kick against the problem and anyone we deem to be in the way. However fear shows up in these situations, it has one thing in common. It's about self first. After all, ego is Latin for I. And here's the problem. When leading through a crisis or a major challenge, if we allow ourselves to be driven by any form of fear, it is neither sustainable nor is it empowering. Trust quickly diminishes. We stop caring for our people and increasingly focus on the numbers. Stress goes up. We induce fear in others. Innovation and engagement suffer as those around us start to close down too. We can even cause a sense of paralysis as those in our team begin to focus just on their own survival too, rather than supporting one another. Ultimately, in these situations, fear holds us back. It gets in our way. So what can we do about this? After all, to experience fear is human nature. It's completely understandable. In this context, what we need to do is to start by recognizing fear for what it is, a warning. As a pilot, when you have an engine fire in a large aircraft, a chuffing loud bell sounds and a big red light flashes in front of you. If you let that continue, you literally cannot hear yourself think. So the first thing we do as pilots is to cancel the bell. It's done its job. I know there's a fire, thank you. Like the engine fire bell, recognizing fear as just a warning allows us to acknowledge the danger and gives us the opportunity to choose to harness something even more powerful than fear itself, something that will accelerate us forward rather than holding us back. And importantly, something that will carry our team forward with us too. This is where we come to the second four-letter word of the day. Love. Now, many of us might shy away from talking about love in a business context. We might associate it with the sort of rom-com films my wife likes us to watch on a Saturday night, or the hippie movement of the 60s and 70s. But let's break those shackles for a moment and broaden what we mean by love. When we're driven by love, it means we're driven by something greater than ourselves. It's about others. It's not about self. It's about seeing possibility rather than scarcity. It's a stand for something rather than a position against something. It's about leading with humble confidence rather than with ego. It's like a bus with love on one side of the aisle and fear on the other. At any one time, love or fear is trying to jump into the driver's seat. As leaders, we have a choice which takes control. We can let fear grab hold of the wheel, or we can choose to let love in there instead. What's key to this is the bridge between fear and love. And that bridge is courage. Courage links fear and love. Now, courage cannot exist without fear, but it can only be sustained through love of something. So let's test this. As the captain of a large passenger aircraft, when I was faced with an engine fire, fear and ego, natural reactions to such an event, I can tell you, had no place on the flight deck. Instead, I needed to have the courage to lead my crew with humble confidence and work with them to get everyone on the ground safely. That's love. When the firefighters overcame their fear to enter the burning towers of the World Trade Center on 9/11, putting their own lives on the line, they did so because of their commitment to saving the lives of others. That's love. When a young mother flees a war zone, she's willing to overcome the fear of stepping into the unknown so as to protect the future of the baby she carries in her arms. That's love. And many on this call might remember the IPAA Gala Awards dinner exactly 1 year ago today, when Sharon Mahoney, who I know is listening to this talk, was prepared to stand, shaking at the microphone in front of a couple of hundred people. She shared her personal trauma of a very intimate medical procedure that had gone wrong. And she did this so as others may be spared the same experience. That was love for others and her belief in what's right, overcoming fear. And by the way, that was also great leadership. Now, we can all get it when there are dramatic examples like these. But what does it look like to be driven by love and not fear as a business leader in times of crisis? Well, I've been doing some research for my book, and I came across quite a few great examples, one of which is actually from the print industry. So let me take you back. It was Wednesday, the 7th of February, 2007. A lady, Kath, you may know, Kath Duran, the MD of Spectrum Plastics, a small business based up in Stockport. She received a phone call that shook her to the core. Their biggest client for many years phoned to tell her that they were cancelling their contract with immediate effect. With no warning, Spectrum would lose £2.7 million in revenue overnight. That was around 70% of their turnover at the time. It was potentially catastrophic. Now, Kath was no doubt immediately gripped by fear. Why wouldn't she be? And yet, if she allowed fear to continue in the driver's seat, it would likely seal the fate of a company that had been founded by others all the way back in 1922. This crisis was on her watch. Now, with fear in the driver's seat, Kath would have likely gone to her people and brought them all in and told them that, well, you've got 6 months to make up the shortfall in revenue or you're out of a job. But anyone who knows Kath also knows that's not who she is. Instead, she used fear to activate courage, to choose to be driven by love. That love was a commitment to the future of her company, combined with a commitment to her people, the mortgages they had to pay, and the families they needed to support. So, the first thing that Kath did was to gather all of her people together. She broke the news to them, and then she told them all to continue to come back into work as usual. The company had built up some emergency money in the bank, and they would all get paid while they figured out what to do. Next, Kath saw opportunity. She saw an opportunity to improve how they all did things. She asked each of her machine operators to do a study to measure precisely the actual output they could support sustainably. This enabled them to offer more competitive bids based on actual throughput rather than the machine manufacturer's estimates they've been using for years. She then offered each of her people professional development training, everything from IT to warehouse management to forklift driving. Here's the thing, Kath took herself on too. In a great act of leading with humble confidence, she created what she called the board you cannot afford, where she paid for coaching from experienced financial directors, marketing experts, and sales specialists. The result? 6 months after receiving that terrible phone call, Kath had limited losses to 140k. A year later, it was just £14,000. But here's the thing, an unexpected bonus was that they were fully prepared as a company when the 2008 financial crisis hit, and it barely affected them at all. As for her people, apart from 5 who took voluntary early retirement, she held on to everyone, including someone she had hired the week of the call. In fact, 6 months later, she rehired one of those who'd taken early retirement after he complained of being bored out of his tiny mind sitting at home. To Kath's amazement, Spectrum also became the winners of a National Learning Achievement Award, recognising all the training she had encouraged her people to do. But most importantly, despite all today's problems, Kath continues to have a loyal, supportive team who believe they can take on anything. They have each other's back. It's a feeling that feeds innovation, commitment, and a willingness to go above and beyond. And it is all sourced from the left side of the bus. When something that is really important to us is under threat, we always have a choice between love and fear. It's the choice to respond by having love in that driver's seat. And we always have that choice. A couple of years ago, through a mutual friend, I had the opportunity to spend some time with Malala Yousafzai. Malala is that young woman from Pakistan who recovered after being shot in the head when she was 15 because of her belief in education for all, regardless of gender or background. After almost being killed, it would have been easy for her to give in and be led by fear. But instead, she used fear as the catalyst for courage to strengthen her resolve and to be driven by love of what she believes in and what she stands for. Since then, she's become recognized, as we know, as the global champion for education. Oh, and she also won the Nobel Peace Prize. The wonderful thing, though, I noticed while I chatted to Malala is that there's no ego that gets in her way at all. She exudes humble confidence. We too can choose to use fear as the catalyst for courage to have us be driven by love of our people, love of what we bring to the world through the work that we do, love of what we stand for. When we do this, we open up more possibility, more solutions, more creativity and innovation from ourselves and from our team. Context is everything. And a context of love beats a context of fear, hands down, every time. Now, I just want to share one last thought with you before we go to questions, which reflects perhaps where we find ourselves in the current business climate. And it's an aeroplane story. Those of you who know me know that I've got loads of aeroplane stories. And this goes back to when I was a young captain. I was 26 years old. I hadn't been a captain for very long, and this was of a passenger jet carrying about 140 people. And good heavens, that was over 30 years ago now. And we're flying from the UK all the way down to Ascension Island with a tiny speck of an island in the South Atlantic. Now, we couldn't get all there in one go, so we had to stop off for fuel. And where we dived into was Dakar in Senegal, which is on the west coast of Africa, on the bulbous bit. It's right down by the equator. And it gets quite challenging, the weather around there, because you have the big air mass of the north meeting the air mass of the south, and you get these huge thunderstorms and massive thunderclouds. But anyway, we had to go in there. We fought our way through the thunderstorms and lined up, and we were on the approach, and we landed on the runway. And it's a fairly small airfield 30 years ago. As we finished our landing roll, I saw the cracks in the runway, which had been filled in with tar, like you get on the roads around Oxford. And then I realized that quite a few of these black lines were actually moving, and it wasn't cracks in the pavement at all. They were snakes, which gave you pause for thought. But anyway, we taxied in and we shut down, and we wanted to get our fuel as quickly as possible. A, because it wasn't very secure staying there overnight, and also in about an hour, when the sun went down, the airfield closed. They didn't operate at night, so we really needed to get out of there. So we hustled people along. We managed to get the fuel in and taxied out about 10 minutes before the airfield was going to close. And we launched into the darkening sky, and we turned south, and were faced with these massive thunderclouds, these big cumulonimbus clouds. And there was lightning. It was quite dramatic at night. There was lightning flashing all around us. So as we started to climb, we're using our radar, which helps us to pick our way through the really big, dangerous cells, thunderstorms, and find our way through a safer route. And as we were doing this, we were about 25,000 feet. And we must have picked up a downdraft from one of these thunderclouds. And it started to push us down. At one stage, we had full power on and going down at 4,000 feet a minute. Yeah, I can tell you a bit of fear kicked in there. But we managed to scramble up and overcome this downdraft and continue our climb. And then our radar packed up. That piece of equipment we're using to pick our safe path through all these clouds. And I remember I turned to my navigator, because this was a very old airplane. Most of what I've flown is in a museum these days. But anyway, I turned around to my navigator, who was this guy, probably about my age as I am now, but Pete Cottrell was his name, very experienced navigator, twice my age. And I said, right, so we've lost our radar, terrible weather around here. What's your input? What should we do? Should we try and carry on, or should we turn back and try and get the air filter open and go back to Dakar and land? And he turned to me in very blunt military humor, using other words beginning with F. He said, well, I won't repeat it, but the gist of it was, we know that it's flipping awful back there. So I recommend, Captain, we carry on. So that's what I decided to do. And we carried on and fought our way through. And about 10, 15 minutes later, we cleared the tops of these clouds and into the clear blue sky. Now, I tell that story for today because everything that we've been through, particularly over the last year, it's like fighting through those storms, and we feel ourselves being pushed down by the currents quite often. And there's a great temptation of wanting to go back and how it all was before. But really what we need to do is just to carry on forward, fight our way through those clouds, and we too will come out to that clear blue sky again, and it'll be smooth. Thank you very much indeed for listening.